And good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon.
Yeah.
I can't tell time. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to get up our PowerPoint instead of just talking randomly.
Can
Let's pretend that sharing actually works, right?
everybody see them?
Can everybody see our PowerPoint? Fantastic.
Perfect.
I'm Dawn Zimmer. I'm the administrative librarian at Hines Community College in Raymond, Mississippi. And I'm joined by my colleague, Naomi Hertian Magola, who's our reference and instruction librarian. A quick note on how we're going to run this. Naomi and I are going to take turns through the sections, and we've built in time at the end for Q&A. If questions occur to you as we go, please drop them in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. The title of this session captures a real art. When generative AI arrived on our campus, the way it arrived on all of yours, the primary response was not excitement, it was anxiety. Among faculty who weren't sure what to say, among students who weren't sure what was allowed, among administrators who knew something needed to happen but couldn't agree on what. The library had to figure out what our role was in that moment. The session is the story of how we answered that question and what we built as a result. Yep, turning pages is hard, y'all. Sorry. A little context on where we're coming from. Hines Community College is a 6-campus institution in Mississippi. We're a primarily Black institute. One of our campuses carries an HBCU designation. That context matters. Equity and access are not abstract values in our work, they're structural realities we design around every day. My path
My path ran through public and school libraries before academic librarianship, which gave me a particular orientation towards meeting people where they are. When we talk about faculty development today, we mean exactly that, starting from anxiety, curiosity, or skepticism and building from there. Neither of us came to this work as AI enthusiasts. We came as information professionals who needed a response to something that was already happening on our campus faster than anyone had a plan for.
Okay, so here's how we'll spend our time today. 5 sections, moving from diagnosis to framework to application. We'll open with the problem, what generative AI actually looked like on a community college campus with no plan, which is pretty much where we were. Then we'll make the case for a library leadership, which is not self-evident to every administrator. Third, we'll walk through what we actually built, the workshop series, the instructional formats, the methods. Fourth, we'll be honest about what we got wrong and what surprised us. And fifth, we'll hand you a framework you can take back to your own institution. Drop questions in the chat as we go. We'll formally open Q&A at the end, but would rather catch confusion early than let it accumulate.
So these 4 quotes are composites, voices we heard repeatedly in our first year of AI literacy work. They're worth sitting with because they show the texture of the problem. It wasn't one thing, it was 4 things happening at once. Faculty were watching students use tools they didn't understand themselves. Some faculty had tried the tools, gotten burned by hallucinations, as we all have, and concluded the whole enterprise was unreliable. Students were genuinely confused about what was permissible, and that confusion wasn't laziness or evasion. It was a predictable result of institutions that hadn't decided what they thought yet. And administration was also uncertain. Everyone agreed that policy was needed. Nobody could agree on what it should say. We noticed that all 4 problems shared a common root. People didn't have shared language, reliable information, or a trusted space to ask questions without feeling judged. And those were precisely the things that the library is built to provide. We didn't arrive with answers, we arrived with a framework for helping people ask better questions. That turns out to be more useful.
Understanding our context matters because it shaped every decision we made. Hinds Community College has 6 campuses across central Mississippi. We're a primarily Black institute. One of our campuses carries a HBCU designation, which means equity, history, and institutional identity are woven into how we approach educational technology. AI bias, access gaps, and the history of technology as a tool of exclusion are not abstract concerns for us. We are a small library team serving an enormous footprint. Scalability is not optional. Anything we built had to work without adding 5 new positions. We don't have the budget for that.
No.
As y'all can all understand, I'm sure. And we serve a community college population, students who are often first generation, often working, often navigating college alongside significant life responsibilities. We can't assume prior technology comfort or hours of unstructured exploration. We have to be concrete, practical, and fast. I raise all of this because the principal transfers even if your institution looks nothing like ours. Your strategy should be shaped by your people and your constraints, not by what a research university's library did. We'll come back to this when we get to the transferability framework.
So why the library? This is the question we had to answer for ourselves before we could answer it for anyone else. Why should the library lead us? Why not IT? Why not the Center for Teaching and Learning if your institution has one? The answer is an institutional position. The library is trusted in a specific way. We are not the people who we are not the people who catch plagiarism. We are not the people who set the grade. We are the people that you come to when you have a question you're embarrassed to ask in your department and you need someone to take it seriously without judging you for it. That trust is enormously valuable when the topic is AI, because AI arrives loaded with anxiety, moral uncertainty, and questions about what's allowed. When a faculty member told us, "I don't even know what ChatGPT is, and I'm embarrassed to admit it," that was a library conversation, not an IT ticket, not a professional development workshop where they'd have to sit in front of colleagues and perform competence they don't have yet. The second point, AI literacy is information literacy. It is the intellectual grounding for everything we built. We are not starting from zero. We had years of practice teaching source evaluation, authority tracing, verification. AI outputs need exactly the same treatment. We just had to make the connection explicit.
The word ecosystem appears in our title. So let's define that specifically rather than let it float around as jargon. A one-off workshop is an event. Someone shows up, learns something, and leaves. If it's well-timed and well-designed, they carry something useful away. But there's no reinforcement, no ongoing community, no way for learning to compound over time. An ecosystem is different. It's interconnected programming that serves multiple audiences through multiple formats, using shared language and frameworks that reinforce each other across contexts. When a faculty member attends a workshop, learns the verification ladder, and then hears a student mention it at the reference desk, that's an ecosystem working. The learning compounds because the environment supports it. This distinction changes what you design for. If you're building a one-off, you optimize for the 45 minutes you have. If you're building an ecosystem, you optimize for what participants will be able to do 6 months later and what structure supports that development over time. We were not trying to solve AI literacy in a single session. We were trying to create the conditions under which AI literacy could develop, persist, and spread.
Here's how the ecosystem was structured. 4 pillars, each doing different work, all using shared language and all reinforcing each other. Faculty development is the part most people think about when they hear library AI workshops. We'll go through the 8 workshops shortly, but faculty development is one leg of the table, not the whole table. Student instruction is where the information literacy side lives in the most direct way. AI is now part of research conversations, whether we plan for it or not. Students arrive at the reference desk with AI-generated sources they need help evaluating. We brought that into the frame explicitly. The information literacy integration pillar is about making the conceptual connection visible. AI literacy is information literacy. The skills students already have, evaluating sources, tracing authority, verifying claims, transfer directly. Our job is to make the explicit rather than treating AI as an entirely separate discipline. Institutional culture is the one that doesn't get enough attention. Building a campus where AI is discussable, where faculty feel safe admitting confusion, where students understand what's expected, that's cultural work. The library does it through relationships, through accessibility, and through consistently modeling the approach we want the whole campus to adopt: curious, critical, and non-judgmental.
So let's talk about the workshop series. 8 workshops, standalone. A faculty member can attend any one without having attended the others, but designed to be complementary, so someone who attends several builds a progressively more sophisticated skill set. The design philosophy was deliberate. We didn't want a required sequence that excluded late arrivers or that demanded faculty commit to attending all 8. Community college faculty are busy. Required sequences generate low attendance. By making each workshop complete in itself, we lowered the barrier to entry while preserving depth for those who wanted to go further. Notice the arc. We started with foundational understanding. What actually is this technology? And moved through tool exploration, practical skills, pedagogical design, discipline-specific applications, and the hardest questions at the end, evaluation and academic integrity. The capstone is where everything else converges. In the next several slides, we'll walk through the tiers. We won't spend equal time on every workshop. Some are more straightforward than others, but I want you to see the logic of how the series is constructed.
The first 3 workshops form the foundation. They do specific, deliberate work. Workshop 1, which is what is generative AI really, is a demystification workshop. The most important thing that it accomplishes is explaining why hallucinations happen. When faculty understand that AI generates plausible sounding text rather than retrieving verified facts, which, man, it would be awesome if it just did that.
Right?
That there's no index behind it, just pattern completion. Their relationship to technology changes. They stop being surprised by the errors and start understanding them as structural. That is meaningful intellectual shift, and it makes everything else in the series more tractable. The design orientation is informed skepticism rather than enthusiasm. We're not selling this technology. We're explaining it so people can use their own judgment. Workshops 2 and 3 are hands-on tool sessions. The key design principle is guided exploration rather than demonstration. We do not lecture our people on what AI can do. We put them in front of the tools with specific tasks and structured reflection prompts. There's a significant difference between knowing conceptually that AI outputs vary by prompt and actually sitting with a prompt and watching it. The latter changes behavior.
Workshop 4, Prompting 101, has the most self-explanatory subtitle in the series. The title is accurate. Most faculty dissatisfaction with AI tools is a prompting problem. When you ask AI to, quote, write something about climate change, you get something vague and borderline useless. When you tell it what role to play, what contracts to work in, and what format you need, and what your specific question is, you get output that might actually be worth evaluating. We treat prompting as teachable, improvable skill, not a magical art. Workshop 5 is the one I'd argue is the most important for faculty. The should I allow AI question has been answered for most of us by the fact that students are already using it. The real question is, now what? How do I redesign my assignments so that they either use AI in a way that is genuinely serving learning, or so that AI substitution doesn't undermine what I'm trying to teach? The 3 design frames, AI resistant, AI integrated, AI agnostic, give faculty a vocabulary and a set of options, not mandates, options. Faculty need autonomy in this conversation, not directives from the library. We provide the framework. They decide how to apply it in their discipline.
Workshop 6 is intellectually the most grounded session in the series because it makes the information literacy AI connection explicit rather than implicit. The verification ladder is our adaptation of the standard IL verification practice for AI-generated content. The steps: isolate the specific claim you're evaluating, classify what kind of claim it is, factual, statistical, attributional, interpretive, because different claim types require different verification strategies. Source appropriately for that claim type, tested against evidence, revise or confirm your assessment. This is not new framework. It's the same critical thinking we apply to any source. We renamed it and made it explicit because AI output has a way of sliding past critical evaluation. Text that reads confidently needs to be treated with the same skepticism that we apply to an anonymous blog post. The latter helps people slow down. Workshop 7 was the surprise. We were uncertain whether faculty would show up on a session about AI and slide design. They showed up in numbers. Make my presentation less terrible is apparently a universally compelling pitch. We use the practical task as an entry point and then layer in the critical questions. Where do these images come from? What biases are baked into the generative image models? Who owns AI-generated images? That's how a low anxiety door opens into a substantive conversation.
And workshop 8 is where everything else pays off. A faculty member who's been through previous sessions arrives at the capstone with a working conceptual model of how AI functions, experience using it, and a vocabulary for evaluation. The capstone puts all of that to work in the hardest context, academic integrity. Let me be direct about the academic integrity conversation. It's not primarily about enforcement. That's the most common mistake I see instructors or institutions make. They built their AI response around detection, punitive policies, and finding cheaters. Those conversations have their place, but detection-focused approaches don't build the literacy we actually need. And they create an adversarial dynamic that makes honest conversation nearly impossible. This workshop takes a different approach. It asks faculty to think about academic integrity not as a rule to enforce, but as a practical model. What does transparent AI use look like? What does honest acknowledgement of AI assistance look like? If we want students to develop those practices, we have to demonstrate them ourselves. This is also where we have the most direct conversations about what AI detection tools can and cannot do. The short version, they're unreliable. They have known bias against non-native English writers, and over-reliance on them creates false confidence. That's a hard message for faculty who feel overwhelmed and want a simple solution, but it's the accurate one.
The AI reference interview. This is what we consider the most distinctly librarian contribution to AI literacy instruction, the AI reference interview framework. Reference librarians understand people rarely ask the questions that they need. Someone asked for books about the Civil War, and what they actually need is 3 primary sources about the role of Mississippi regiments and for a history paper due on Friday. The reference interview surfaces the actual need through skilled questioning. The same skill applies when working with AI-generated information. When a student shows you something from ChatGPT and asks, "Is this right?" the librarian's instinct is to ask clarifying questions. What is this for? What kind of claim is it? What would this mean if it were wrong? These questions change the evaluation task entirely. The carousel activity makes concrete into a workshop setting. We created 4 station cards, each with AI-generated content in different disciplines, each containing deliberate errors. Participants move through these stations applying the verification ladder. The errors are representative. Hallucinated citations are the most common, AI failure mode. Plausible but wrong statistics are harder to catch. Fabricated expert names are surprisingly frequent. Outdated information requires knowing to ask when the training data ends. This activity builds intuition. It's a real difference between knowing conceptually that AI hallucinates and having experience of catching a hallucination in a realistic context. The latter is what sticks.
So 4 formats. Format diversity is what makes an ecosystem rather than a workshop series. The same content in one format reaches one segment of your campus. 4 formats lets us reach different audiences at different points of readiness in a different institutional context. The Canvas courses are scalable asynchronous option. Faculty who can't make a scheduled workshop, staff who want to revisit content, anyone who learns better independently, all of them have an on-demand path into AI literacy. It also means the material is always available without requiring us to schedule a new session. The professional development series, the 8 workshops, is the primary structured learning track. Formal PD credit is available. We designed each workshop to stand alone so faculty can attend one or all 8. The depth compounds if they do the full series, but we don't require that commitment up front. The embedded BI session, bibliographic instruction, AI module is how we reach students who were never going to seek out an AI literacy workshop on their own. When a class already has a library instruction session scheduled, we have built-in audience and the natural connection to whatever research assignment they're working on. The AI module goes in there. The one-off by instructor request is the most tailored format. An instructor emails and says, I'm doing a research assignment in 2 weeks, and I want my students to understand how to evaluate AI outputs in the context of environmental science or nursing or history. We come in for one class period and we connect the skills directly to their specific assignment. It requires more preparation per session, but this transfer to actual student work is immediate. The key insight, you're not going to reach everyone with one format designed for the range.
So what we expected versus what actually happened. Honest accounting, 3 things that went differently than we expected. First, we anticipated that faculty resistance would be our main challenge. It wasn't. The dominant emotional register was anxiety, not hostility. And that distinction matters enormously for your program design. You address resistance with an argument. You address anxiety with information, structure, and safety. Most of what we need to do was to create conditions where people felt safe enough to say, I don't understand this, and get a straight answer without judgment. Second, the assumption that students were confident AI users was half right. Technically, yes. Ethically and institutionally, no. Students who use ChatGPT to write a paper and the students who use it to understand a concept that they didn't follow in a lecture are doing very different things. Most of our institutions hadn't given students any framework for making the distinction. That's a gap the library can help fill. Third, the practical tools workshops were popular, but the conceptual workshops, pedagogy, design, output evaluation, generated the most follow-up, the most return visits, the most conversation. The appetite for help was larger than the appetite for help with doing. We underestimate that. Don't do that.
What actually worked? 5 lessons.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be specific about each of these because they're generally learnable, not retrospective rationalizations. Trust first, content second. We spent time early in the process on relationship building that didn't look like real work. Showing up in departments, answering one-off questions with no agenda, being consistently available and non-judgmental. The workshops that happened after we'd established that presence performed better. The trust is prerequisite, not the nice to have. Naming the anxiety. The most consistent positive feedback from early workshops was, I'm glad you said this was hard. That's a low bar, but it signals something real. People had been isolated in their uncertainty, and naming it was collectively was itself a service. Start there. Shared language compounds. Once verification ladder became a shared term, once a faculty member heard a student use it at the reference desk or a colleague used it in a meeting, it acquired social meaning beyond the workshop. That's how an ecosystem starts to be self-sustaining. Start where faculty are. The temptation to build a coherent curriculum that moves everyone through the same arc. Real people don't cooperate with that. Designed for entry at multiple points. The neutrality advantage. I want to underscore this because it's the competitive advantage libraries have that no other campus unit does. We are not the graders. We are not the policy writers. That's a structural position. Use it consciously.
Building your ecosystem, a transferable framework. So this is the framework that we would hand you if we can consult with you each individually. 3 phases: assess, anchor, amplify. Phase 1 is diagnosis before prescription. Before you build anything, you need to understand what's already happening on your campus. Where is the AI use? Who's already experimenting? What questions are faculty asking? What's the emotional temperature? You need to map this before you can design programming that actually addresses your campus needs and your campus's specific situation. Don't build the workshops we build the workshops your campus needs. Phase 2 is foundation setting. 1 or 2 pilot workshops focused on shared language and establishing the library as a trusted AI conversation space. We recommend with starting with a foundational understanding session. Because shared conceptual vocabulary is a prerequisite for everything else, if some people think AI is magic and others think that it's a plagiarism machine, you can't have a productive campus conversation around it. Phase 3 is expansion and self-sustainment. Build out formats, grow the series, form the partnerships. And this is a signal that an ecosystem is actually working. You start to see faculty who've been through the programming, mentoring their colleagues. The library doesn't have to carry everything anymore. One thing to emphasize, this is not a linear journey anyone enters at phase 1. Some of you are already in phase 3. Some are still in phase 1. The framework works wherever you enter, and you may move through the phases at different speeds in different departments.
I want to close the content section by connecting this work directly to the conference theme, not as a formality, but because the connection is genuine. Renewal. The library's institutional position has not become obsolete in an AI era. It has become more necessary. People need a trusted space to navigate technological confusion. They need a place that will give them accurate information without judgment. They need someone who speaks both information literacy and technology fluency. That's us. Renewal means recognizing that our core value is intact and leaning into it. Innovation. Building this ecosystem was hard. It required designing content nobody had built for us, arguing for the library's role in conversations that didn't always include us by default, and being willing to get things wrong and revise. That is what innovation actually looks like, not a dramatic transformation, but an iterative process of building, testing, and improving over months. Change. Libraries that lead on AI literacy and change are change agents. We don't have to be reactive. We can be the institution that helps the campus move from anxiety to practice, from silence to shared language, from fragmented experimentation to coherent strategy. That's a significant thing to be at this particular moment in academic history. And now, because we talk really fast, we have apparently all the time in Western history for questions. So knock yourselves out. Because we talk really fast. Sorry about that. Sorry.
You are perfectly on time. You've left just the right amount for questions. We've got about 15 minutes left. So I'm going to stop the recording here. People feel free to either turn on your microphone to ask questions or pop them in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that as well.